Hello and welcome to the video Spring Security Secure REST APIs using HTTP Basic Authentication with Database Users. I am Nam Ming at Code Java.net. Throughout this video, you will learn about HTTP Basic Authentication in details, how it works, and how to use Spring Security to secure an existing REST API with HTTP Basic Authentication, and the users are stored in MySQL relational database with passwords encoded in BCrypt format using BCrypt algorithm. And you will also learn how to test HTTP Basic Authentication with web browser called Postman, automated test with Spring Security test. I will show you how to update an existing Java Spring project that uses the following technologies: Java and Spring Framework, Spring Web, Spring Security, Spring Data API, and Hibernate Framework. And the software programs I used in this video are Java Development Kit JDK, Spring Tool Suite IDE, MySQL Community Server, and MySQL Workbench, Command Tool, and Postman desktop application for testing REST APIs. Let me show you an existing Java Spring project in which I implement a very simple REST API. It's a kind of hello world REST API. As you can see, I have only one controller. It is a REST controller with one handler method that exposes an API for the request at the endpoint path is / or the context root of the application, and it returns hello world REST API. It is a very simple Spring MVC application. Now let me start this application to perform a GET request to test out the API. You see the server Tomcat started on port number 8080, context path empty. And now let me use Chrome browser to test the API. Localhost port number 8080, and you see it returns the message hello world REST API. So you see this API endpoint is not secure. Everyone can make request, perform request to invoke the API. So in the next few minutes, you will learn how to secure this hello world REST API using HTTP Basic Authentication with Spring Security. Okay, let me stop the application. So what is HTTP Basic Authentication? You know, HTTP Basic is the simplest authentication technique to secure web resources, including REST APIs. It does not require cookies, session identifiers, or login pages, and HTTP Basic Authentication uses standard fields in HTTP header to exchange the credentials between the client and the server. The pros of HTTP Basic Authentication are it's simple and quick to implement. It is understood by any HTTP compliant clients. The cons are username and password are encoded in base64 format, not encrypted, so it's very insecure unless the exchange is over a secure connection such as HTTPS or TLS, and no standard method to log out users. This sequence diagram helps you understand how HTTP Basic Authentication works between a client and a server. Firstly, the client sends a GET request to the server and to access a protected resource, and the server returns the status for one unauthorized with the response header www authenticate basic RAM. RAM is any string. Okay. Then if the client sees this response header, it asks the user to provide username and password, typically in form of a dialog box in a web browser, and then the client sends another GET request with the request header authorization basic, and then the basic for encoding of username and password combination to the server. And on the server side, the server checks for the credentials are valid or not. If the credentials username and password are correct, are valid, then the server returns status to our OK with the protected resource. Else, if the credentials are invalid, then the server returns status for a one unauthorized. Note that the client sends credentials in authorization header as basically for encoding of username and password joined by a colon, as you can see here. And the username and password cannot contain colons. And the RAM name here is used to describe the protected area or to indicate the scope of protection. Now let's get back to the project, and we need to update the project dependencies. So open the pom.xml file. In this project I used Maven, and you can see I used Spring Boot version 3.2.4, and we need to add some more dependencies here. The next one is for Spring Data API. In order to use Java Persistence API with Hibernate framework, so the artifact ID is Spring Boot Starter Data API, and the next one is to use Spring Security. So the artifact ID is Spring Boot Starter Security, and the next one we want to use Spring Security Test. So change the group ID to .springframework.security, and artifact ID is Spring Security Test. And the last dependency we need to use is MySQL connector J, which is JDBC driver for MySQL database. So the group ID is com.mysql. Artifact ID is MySQL connector J. Okay, so you can see the additional dependencies we need to use for the project. And then we need to update the application configuration file, application.properties file here to define data source properties. So we define the data source URL is like this. Point to a database schema on local MySQL server, localhost, port number 3306-DB, and username is root, password is password, and we also specify some properties specific to Hibernate, such as DDL auto equal update. So Hibernate framework will automatically create the tables from Java entity classes source SQL to print the SQL statements in the console, and format SQL to format the SQL statements in the console. And I used MySQL Workbench to create a new database schema named testdb. Here, new schema name is testdb. Apply. Okay, successful, and we have a new database schema testdb here, and you see no tables at the moment. Alright, now let me start the application. Okay, the application has started successfully, and if I refresh the request here, I got the login page because Spring Security secures the application by default. But we want to use HTTP basic authentication instead. No worry, I will show you how to update the project code to use the HTTP basic instead of login form like this. Next, let's code the data access layer or repository layer. Create a new entity class that maps to a table in the database that represents user information. So we create a new Java class here, user, and we use some annotations to specify that this is an entity class and it maps to a table in the database which the name is users, and we declare some fields for this user entity class. The first one is ID of type integer for the primary key, and the second one is username. The third one is password. Okay, and we use some annotations in JPA here, ID, to indicate that this field maps to the ID column or primary key column in the database, and generated value with strategy is identity generation type, not identity, to indicate that the values in this field in the primary column will be automatically generated by the database. And for the field username, we use the column annotation to specify the nullable attribute equal false, meaning that this field must have value and unique equal true, and the maximum length of username is 30 characters. And similarly for the field password, we specify nullable equal false, and maximum length is 80 characters. And because we are going to store encoded password in BCrypt algorithm in the password field. Okay, and then we generate getter and setters. Just generate getter and setters for the field. Generate. Okay. And the next one, we need to code a new interface to use Spring Data JPA, with the name of the interface is user repository. It extends the super interface is API repository, with the type of the entity is user here, and type of the ID field is integer. Okay, here we go. And now let me start the application to let Hibernate framework create the table users in the database. You see, it prints SQL statements to create table users. Yeah. Now let me check in MySQL Workbench. Refresh. Here you can see a new table called created users. Here we can see the columns ID, password, and username. And let me alter the table to see the full structure. You see, ID primary key not null, auto increment, password not null, maximum size length is 80, username maximum length is 30, not null, unique. Okay, so far so good. Okay, let me stop the application for now. Next, let's insert some sample users in the database in the users table here with ID, password, and username. And because we encode password in BCrypt, so we need to code a very simple class to generate BCrypt encoded string password generator with main method. Okay, this is a temporary class and you should delete this class later. So here we use a password encoder from Spring Security encoder equal new password encoder. Equal new BCrypt password encoder, and we specify the raw password is. For example, I'm going to insert some sample users data with password is a reverse of username lambda for user admin. Then I use encoder, encode the raw password, and it returns encoded password, and print out the encoded password to the console. Encoded password here, and run this program to get the BCrypt encoding of the password run as Java application here. Okay, you see, and then we copy. Okay, and the username, the first username is admin, and password here, paste. Okay, and the second user is username admin, and the next one is for user name hm, and username hm. So the password is mhman, okay, and run the program. Okay, so we have the encoded password here. So I insert two sample users here, name hm, and click apply to insert two new rows into this table. Apply, close, successful. You see, we have two users in the users table here. Next, I'm going to show you how to configure Spring Security to enable HTTP basic authentication for the application to secure the API here. So we create a new Java class, security config, and we use the configuration annotation. And because in this project we use Spring Security 6, so we declare bin of type security filter chain here, security filter chain, with the parameter is HTTP security object, HTTP. And then here we enable HTTP basic authentication. We call HTTP authorize request, HTTP request, and use DSL syntax with lambda expression like this. We want to secure all requests to the application, so we write this statement and request authenticated. That means the application requires authentication for all the requests. Return http.build. That rows declaration here. Okay, and then we need to disable session management, because for REST API it should be stateless, so we disable session management like this. Session management, session creation policy is stateless, and we also disable CSRF like this. CSRF disable, and now we enable HTTP basic using this statement HTTP basic, and to use the default configuration we use customizer class, customizer interface with defaults. Okay, so the default configuration of HTTP basic in Spring Security is good enough for almost cases of HTTP basic authentication. Okay, now let me start the application here. Okay, up and running, and let me refresh here. Make the call to the API again. Let me open the developer tools here to see the details of request and response. Let me invoke the API. And now you see it prompts a dialog box asking me to enter username and password. That means HTTP basic authentication is working. Just click cancel for now, and I got the error 401. And you see in the developer tools here, you can see, let me check. You can see in the response header here, you can see the server sends the header www authenticate with value is basic RAM, and RAM name is just RAM. That means the server requires the client to send authorization header to perform HTTP basic authentication. You see. Now let me try to call the API again and enter correct username and password admin Nimda. But it still asked me to enter username and password again. It's because we have not configured Spring Security yet to use credentials in database. So we need to update this security configuration class to tell Spring Security to look up credentials in the database. So we need to declare a bin for password encoder, and return a new BCrypt password encoder. And then we need to declare another bin of type user details service, return new custom user details service, and we create this class right now. Here it implements the interface user details service and overrides the method load user by username, and we use the service annotation for this class. And we need to have auto-wire reference of user repo here. And in the user repository interface, we declare method that finds user by username, string username, and at runtime, Spring Data API will generate the corresponding SQL statement based on this method name. Okay, then we stop the application because we are making a lot of changes. Okay, and here we use the user repo file by username, and it returns user object and we check if this user object is null, then we throw a new exception null, and then we throw a new username not found exception. which the message is could not find user with username followed by username. Else, if a user found, we return a new custom user details object wrapping the user object, and we create this class right now. That this class create class custom user details that implements the interface user details. Okay, here we go. And here in this class we need to have a private field of type user and generate constructor using fields such generate constructor using fields for the field user here. Okay, and for this method we return get authorities. For this get password method we return user get password, and get username method we return user get username. And for all the methods that return boolean value, we return true for all. True. Yeah, okay. Alright, and then we need to declare bin of type down authentication provider. Down authentication provider. We create a new down authentication provider object. Down provider equal new down authentication provider. Return down provider. And sorry, it should be auth provider. And we set custom user detail service and password encoder. Set password encoder. And set user detail service. Okay, that's for the configuration. And now let me start the application again and test HTTP basic authentication using Chrome web browser. Alright, now let me refresh here and enter correct username and password admin. Click sign in. You see, it works, and I see the message hello world REST API. Let me update the controller here to print the name of the authenticated user. So we specify the parameter is of type principal. And instead of saying hello world REST API, we say hello world and then the name of the authenticated user, principal REST name. Okay, and that's the API again here. You see hello world admin, and in the response, in the request details, you can see it sends the header authorization basic and then basically for encoding of username and password combination. Okay, let me copy this basically for encoding and decode. Try to decode using basically for decoder online. Here, paste here, decode, and you can see it is the combination of username and password separated by colon. Okay, and if I try to call the API again, you see it does not ask me to enter username and password again, and you can see there's no standard method to log out user. But anyway, the HTTP basic authentication is working. Next, let me show you how to test HTTP basic authentication using the command line tool curl. So open a new terminal, and I have the curl command line tool here, and type curl localhost 8080 to call the API. and you see I got the status 401 unauthorized, and the header www authenticate basic RAM. Notice that you can configure HTTP basic to specify a custom RAM name here. So instead of using customizer with default here, you can customize like this HTTP basic, and you can see the available methods to customize HTTP basic here. And I just want to change the RAM name, so I call RAM name method, for example, my RAM. Okay, and call the API again, and now you see the header www authenticate, and the RAM name is my RAM here. Now to specify username and password using curl, we type curl -u and then username, for example admin, and then the API endpoint. You see in the request it sends the header authorization basic and basic default encoding of username and password, but I got status 401 in the response unauthorized. You see authentication problem because the password is wrong. Now let me specify correct username and password. Yeah, username admin and password is Nimda. You see I got status 2 hours successful, and you can see the response body hello world admin here. Let me test another credentials here, and specify the username is namhm, and password is mhman, the reverse of username. And I also got successful status hello world namhm. That means HTTP basic authentication is working, and that's how to test HTTP basic authentication using curl command line tool. Now let me show you how to test HTTP basic authentication for REST API using a Postman desktop program. So I have the Postman application here, and add a request in this collection. Request name HTTP basic authentication. HTTP method is get, and API endpoint is localhost phone number 8080, and click send. If I click send, I got the status 401 unauthorized, as you can see here. And you can see in the headers, in the headers of the response here, you can see the header www authenticate and basic RAM name equal my RAM. That means the server requires HTTP basic authentication. And to pass credentials in the request here, we click authorization tab here, type choose basic auth, and specify username and password admin Nimda. Click send, and I got the status 2 hour okay, successful. You can see the body here, hello world admin, and let me enter wrong password. You see I got status 401 unauthorized here. Let me enter another credential here, namhm and mhman. Click send. You see status 2 hour okay, and the body is the response here, hello world namhm. In the headers of the request, you can see authorization header and value is basic, and basic default encoding of username and password combination. So that's pretty simple to test HTTP basic authentication for REST API using Postman. Next, let me show you how to write code for unit testing REST APIs that are secure with HTTP basic authentication. So let's create a new test class here. The test class name is home controller test because it is actually testing the controller layer. So we use a web MVC test annotation and specifies the controller class is home controller class that implements the API. Yeah. Okay, and then we need to have a reference of mock MVC object that can be used to perform HTTP request MVC. And the first test method we test for the case should return 401 because no credentials in the request, no credentials. We define the API endpoint here and API endpoint is slash the context root of the application, and here we go MVC perform get API endpoint and expect status is unauthorized. Very simple. The first case. Okay, and run this test. You see, the test is successful. Now we want to see the details of request and response in the console. So go and do and print. Yeah. Okay, and run again. Run again to see the details of request and response. You see the request here, empty header, request URI, and response status for one unauthorized. And you can see the header www authenticate basic RAM equal RAM. You can see we specify the RAM name is my RAM. Yeah, that means the subring this security config class was not loaded for the test, so we need to use the import annotation here to load the security config class with the test and run again. And we got another error when security config class is loaded. You can see error creating bin with name user detail service unsatisfied dependency user repository. That means in the service class we use a repository, so we need to use Mockito here to mock an object of type user repository here. So here we need to have an auto-wire reference. We need to have a mock bin for the type user repository, user report here, and run. Okay, successful. And now you can see the header field in the response www authenticate basic RAM equal my RAM here. So this is a seamless test case. And let's go to the second unit test for HTTP basic authentication of REST API. The test name is should return 200 successful because valid credentials. We expect the status is okay. Okay, and here we specify username is admin and raw password is nimda, and encoded password we copy here, user admin here. Encoded password here, and then we use Mockito to map the code to the user repository. Mockito when user repo the method find by username for the given username, then return a new user object. So we need to update the user entity class here, declare a no argument constructor and another constructor for the fields username and password. For field username and password here. Okay, so we specify a new user object with a given username here, and password here should be encoded password. And then for the API call here, we go with an HTTP basic from Spring Security Test and specify username, and the password should be raw password. Make sense? Okay, and run the test. Right click, run as JV test. You see the test is successful. You can see the details of request and response. Request, it includes the authorization header, basic default encoding of username and password, and response status to our OK here, and the body here, hello world admin. And the last unit test is similar, so should return 401 because invalid credentials. Here we specify invalid raw password here, for example ABCD, and we expect the status is unauthorized. Okay, and run the test. You see the test is successful. Header in the request here, and response status for one unauthorized here, www authenticate header here. So that's basically how to code unit test for testing REST API security with HTTP basic authentication. Note that you use the HTTP basic method, provide username and password here. Right, so far so good. So that you have learned how to secure REST APIs using HTTP basic authentication with users in a database using Spring Security. I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe to my channel, like, comment and share this video. Thanks for watching.